No. Okay, everything's fine, is what you're telling me. Okay.
Hello, everybody. So I cannot see what screen you're seeing, but I'm hoping that you will see both myself and Chris, who is our very special narrative guest today. We have finally figured out how to attach enough wires and programs to our Twitch channel to get him to come and join us, so we're very excited about that. I'm sure, Chris, you are too.
I am. I'm thrilled. This has
Excellent. This
been a colossal endeavour.
It has indeed.
Only made possible by the cutting edge of modern technology.
Yes, and Mac and his
And
weird
mostly Mac,
ability
yes.
to get his weird ability to get all audio devices working.
As superpowers go, that is not bad.
Yeah, I know. I think it's pretty impressive. So I think we're getting the thumbs up that all the technical bits are going well, so I think we can proceed. Hello, everybody. Let us know if you have any problems hearing us, but it sounds like things are okay. This will be a particularly weird podcast for me because I cannot see Chris. I can only hear him in my ear. But I enjoy that it looks like Chris is on.
Yeah, that's yeah. Yeah, that is my natural state.
You should see all the weird places we put him in the office since we normally just have him on an iPad.
Yes. Yeah, it's been suggested I'm finally trapped in a mirror dimension. I am, in fact, always trapped in a mirror dimension, as far as you lot are concerned.
Definitely. It's only on rare occasions we let him out to go to things like EGX.
Yeah.
Cool. So I saw that you had been asking if people had questions. Did you get sent any lovely questions?
I
from
don't
fans?
know, and now I can't check. So chat, ask us questions.
Yes, chat, please ask us questions. I know there's plenty of stuff we can talk about, and I'm more than happy to ask you questions. But I feel like a lot of people will hopefully have joined specifically to ask you questions, Chris.
We can spill some stuff about our third region, Eleutheria, now, I think, because we've done last week we did the big content session where we broke that down into different ports and what the story of the region was and all that kind of stuff, so we can talk about our third region quite a bit as well. Also, I am here sounding very Barry White because I've got a cold. So, yes, I'm extra. How are you doing today?
Yeah, well, I'm just glad that you have a voice to begin with because I was a bit worried during that Eleutherium meeting.
That got pretty grim towards the end there. It did descend.
Yes, to be fair, it's a long meeting.
Yeah.
But I think people will definitely be interested to know because a lot of the people that came and played the game when we brought it to EGX recently were really interested in the lore, especially, of course, the people that have, been with us since Fallen London. And a lot of people were saying stuff like, oh, I really like Sunless Sea because of how weird and dark it was, and I think that region in Sunless Skies will probably tick a few boxes for people.
Yes, I think this is... Eleutheria is probably going to be our darkest, most mysterious region. There's another region that will be more splendid and glorious. But Eleutheria, sure, let's spill some nice big juicy stuff for Eleutheria, shall we? So Eleutheria is, everyone's trustworthy here, right? Everyone here and everyone in chat keeps secrets. This is a select elite group. Eleutheria is still governed by a judgment, but the sun of Eleutheria has gone dark because it has sworn itself to revolution and to the liberation of night. And its region is a place where it offers sanctuary for malcontents and revolutionaries and undesirables and people who wouldn't be accepted elsewhere. So the ports in Eleutheria are quite... you never know what you're going to find in Eleutheria. It could be anything. Some players of Submariner may already have encountered the Star of Eleutheria once before. There's one small, very hard to find, slightly randomized bit of content that means some bits of Eleutheria might seem familiar. And I think we finally settled on a name for the star, which will suggest a couple of other secrets about it, and it's going to be called the Halved. We suggested many names, and we debated for some time, but we did a vote, and the Halved won.
Slightly randomized indeed. Well, I think the name voting is quite an intriguing process.
Yeah, names are really hard, and it's hard to tell if you've come up with a good name, and it's hard to tell if what's the best way to put it? It's easy for names to sound daft until people use them a lot.
Yeah.
And like any name out of Tolkien, I think sounds weird unless you've read Tolkien, and then they sound completely natural and normal. And so we've kind of found that the best way to name things is everyone throws a bunch of names into a pot, or someone throws a bunch of names into a pot, and then we list them all on Slack, and then people vote for the ones they want, and the one that gets the most votes tends to win. Yeah, and if there's like a tiebreaker, someone will make a judgment call, but that's turned out to be the least painful way to do it, because if you try to get the perfect name, you'll spend hours doing it as well.
I enjoyed the phrase judgment call for this particular one.
Yes, indeed. I think this is...
Yes, I'm with you guys.
When I was on a while ago, we were talking about, we were having trouble naming the master species in Sunless Sky. I like my little thing there. That is, behold, the master species. Oh, you can't see me, but I'm doing a little hands bat.
Okay.
I couldn't stop myself. I'm not used to... I keep forgetting that there's a camera. This will inevitably go wrong. But yeah, we couldn't decide on the name for what to call the species that the masters are from. And we went through a load of different stuff. And for ages they were the Chiropteri. But we just didn't... It still didn't sit right with us. And we finally settled on one for them as well. And they're now called the Custodians. So before the masters became masters, they were Custodians.
Which is very fitting. And yes, halved spelled like that. What else have I seen question-wise?
So Reverkiel asks, the Eleutherian tea you can get in Lustrum makes you woozy. Is that how the region will feel? In that it's kind of a malleable place. The laws of the judgments don't hold there. Wooziness is fitting. I wouldn't describe it as, it's not like a theme. It's not, but uncertainty and mystery and fogginess and surprise are kind of key things for Eleutheria, I think.
And this will be... I'm trying to think of, since we have things set up more in a circular manner for Sunless Skies, obviously we will have to go through the Reach to get to any of these other regions.
Yes, that's right.
But is there any particular stage you would imagine in the game that people would be visiting?
So Reach, the way we've set it up, the Reach is where you start, but it also has quite a wide range of difficulty. So some of the ports in there are quite tough to complete. but we assume, and that's because you're going to be passing back and forth through the reach, so it has to stay interesting regardless of what kind of level of advancement you are. It needs to feel relevant for most of the game. So there's a mix of easy and tough ports there. Albion is tougher than the easiest parts of the reach, but sort of low to average difficulty on the whole. And Eleutheria is kind of the next one up, so it's sort of medium to hard, I think. And then the Blue Kingdom is probably going to be really quite hard indeed. We might juggle that a little bit for Eleutheria and the Blue Kingdom, depending how they both shake out. But I think that feels most appropriate. So we would kind of assume that people would go Reach, Albion, Eleutheria, Blue Kingdom. But we're not the boss of you. Do what you want.
Yeah, and if you want to die right away,
yeah,
then you'll know where to go.
Yeah. Well, we say that, but someone will immediately get in the worst ship, sell all their guns, and fly off and complete an ambition in the hardest area. That's what they do.
Excellent. And what kind of sorts of characters might we see in here? Like, what are the people like that might be in Eleutheria?
I think Eleutheria is where, if you are one of our Kickstarter backers who pledged at the level that gets you a character in the game, I suspect most of those characters will end up in Eleutheria. That's just the best fit for all the different kind of ideas people suggested. There are, what other people are there? In fact, I'm going to open the open a document. Which one of these 8 million documents? Here it is. It is very secret. One group that you will find there is the Carnate, who appeared in Sunless Sea, and a faction from the Carnate has come through, and they'll be located in Eleutheria. They were originally going to be located in Albion, but we moved them for various reasons. There's going to be a certain amount of Bohemians in Eleutheria. If you wanted to talk to the sort of individuals you find behind mirrors, Eleutheria would probably be the place to go to.
Excellent.
There are also a fair number of devils in Eleutheria. And revolutionaries as well. There's a port in Eleutheria called Winter's Reside, which lore fans might be able to piece some things together from.
Very, very mysterious, that one.
I'm sure the big fans have immediately got that, as they do, however much we try to hide something.
I'll just wait for the screaming to appear on the screen.
Cytosine says Bohemians seem a natural fit for Eleutheria, and they are, and our original plan was to have this being really quite Bohemian indeed. But we've ended up using Bohemians quite a lot in the Reach and Albion. So we've sort of got a dusting of Bohemia over most regions, is how it's ended up, rather than squidging them all in Eleutheria.
That seems rather fitting, because I'm sure 1905 had, too many Bohemians, left over from the end of the 1800s, so...
yeah, they're everywhere.
Just can't get rid of them, they're everywhere, even in space. I think we had another question as well. So, how do we move between regions once they're all in the game?
We will see. We've talked about two main approaches at the moment. We're going to find out which one is it. What might happen is you just head off the edge of one region into another, and there'll be some sort of visual indicator that says where you can do that, where the path to the next region is. Or it might be you go to the start of a road, and then there's basically a loading screen to another region. Yeah, we'll see how it goes. There's a whole bunch of stuff we'll tie into that. Cool.
And as Chris said, you'd always be sort of passing through the Reach as that middle hub.
That's right. Yeah,
area.
Yeah. The hub's kind of the crossroads of the wilderness. Yeah.
Crossroads. That's a much more content sexy word as opposed to the marketing word that I used, which is hub. And is there an ETA when we can move out of the Reach? We don't want to promise anything yet, but obviously that is certainly something that's on our minds. If you've been following along with our sprint blogs, you'll know that we've started working on Albion, which most likely would be the next region that we'd put out. So there's still a lot of bits and pieces that we have to do because we're also focusing on gaining all that feedback from everybody who's playing now. But it's certainly something that we can't wait to do, for example. So once we have a more secure sort of time frame for that, we'll let you know in one of those dev blogs or in one of these podcasts. So
we've written quite a lot of the content for Albion now, of the port content anyway. I think every single Albion port is now either done or underway. There's someone working on it at the moment. But obviously there's art to do, there's design to do, there's lots of other stuff to do as well.
Definitely. What region will we find the custodians in?
So
if it's not plot
it's
sensitive.
not. I don't think it is plot sensitive. The custodians travel a lot, so you'll probably be able to find them in any region. I'd be a bit surprised if you couldn't find custodians in all the regions, but they will tend to appear. There won't be. There's not many of them in the Reach, for example, and because they're quite tough, they will tend to appear in dangerous areas. There's one really mean thing we've done where this is currently only in design. We'll see if it makes it in.
One?
But well, okay, one of many. Where we've put a custodian spawn point like between two quite safe places. So if you go directly from one to the other, you might get jumped on by an appalling bat monster. So you might want to go round instead. But but generally they keep to kind of isolated places. Yeah.
I think most of our fans will probably go directly.
Yes.
None of this around business.
Yeah.
See, already somebody is pleased.
Straight away.
And, you know, we're talking a bit about one of the new regions, but if you have any questions about any of the other regions that we've talked about or the Reach, please let us know. Chris is a fountain of ridiculous lore and knowledge and somehow keeps that all in his brain.
I'm also remarkably indiscreet, so yeah, I will spill stuff. For example, I can tell people the working titles of all the ports in Eleutheria, and see if that rings any bells for people. One is currently called Langley House. There is the House of Rods and Chains. There is the Collusion of Serpents. There is Winter's Reside. And there is Piranesi, and there is Pan.
And did we already go over the sort of like the more visual / feely version of what the atmosphere would be like in this compared to the Reach or Albion? Yeah,
not a lot. And we've done. I believe Art have done like a color palette for Eleutheria, but we haven't started doing a kind of full visual breakdown of it yet. But in terms of content, we're thinking about lots of dark groves and sort of semi-classical ruins dipped in moonlight, and lots of ivy. I think this is one of the places where I've forgotten his name. There's a particular artist that I'm completely in love with, and we talk about quite a lot. Oh, come on, brain! It'll come back to me in a bit. But he does these amazing pictures of kind of dark forests, and he mixes them with ecclesiastical architecture in such a way that the two seem to kind of blend together a lot. And he's quite a big touchstone for us.
Gotcha. I imagine that in the middle of a conversation later on, you will just shout somebody.
Yeah, I'll shout a German name, like some sort of lunatic. Yeah.
Or we could always put it in a blog as well and showcase one of those pieces, because that would be quite cool, I think.
Yeah. Ah,
There's a question for you.
Reversio asks, is the strong woman at the circus Hephaestus from Fallen London? I don't know. I can't remember. I can, however, ask Cash. I will do that now while we're speaking. Ah, James is listening and has saved me. The artist's name is Caspar David Friedrich.
Excellent. Thank
and
you,
I
James.
encourage Google searches for Caspar David Friedrich, because everything he does is absolutely beautiful and stunning. Cash is also listening and he's typing to me. This is amazing. This is what it must be like to be some sort of spy master at the centre of MI5.
You have all the power.
It's incredible. Cash says it is Hephaestus, yes. I think there's a few places we want to do cameos from Fallen London. It's always a tricky thing to know how many is the right number. We don't want this to be just a endless list of Fallen London and Sunless Sea in-jokes. We want new players to be able to play and enjoy this. But at the same time, we want lots of stuff in there that really appeals to fans. So sometimes all that takes is a character making an appearance, and sometimes it's taking one of our characters and showing them in a new situation and a new environment and how it's changed them. And how and that will then suggest how much their story must have evolved and moved on. Stories don't evolve, you muppet. How their story must have advanced since we last saw them in Sunless Sea or Fallen London. So I think when we have, so I think we plan to do that with the Blind Bruiser. I think the Blind Bruiser's appearance, I think, will be quite a it'll kind of resonate with how we know him from Sunless Sea, but it'll also suggest a whole bunch of changes that he's gone through. So I think are probably going to be quite interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I imagine it's not a walk in the park to have gotten to the high wilderness anyways.
Yes, that's right. It's a big journey, but it is a journey that lots of people did over quite a small span of time. A whole lot of people made that journey, and there were ships taking people to the Avid Horizon and to take them through. If you're not a total Fallen London lore nerd, this is a lot of names and weirdness, but I'm going to assume that this is mostly for the Fallen London lore nerds. Quite a lot of people have come through, but it is like making the journey to America in the 16th century. You know, it's you're committing to a new life in a new place, so it's not something people did lightly. Yeah. Mikey asks, is Eleutheria the seeking Mr. Eaton's name or utmost east of sunless skies? No. I think those would be if we do equivalents to things like that, there will be storylines. There will be things like officer quests and ambitions rather than regions. The regions have to support a whole bunch of different kind of stories and quests and activity. So no, we wouldn't have like one region that's just dedicated to this is the place where it gets super weird and destructive. We need our regions to be able to support quite a lot of different stories.
And presumably the Blue Kingdom would be a bit weird as well, so we have spread it out a bit, or which is weird in a different way.
The Blue Kingdom is going to be really weird. But weird in a completely different way. The Blue Kingdom is where the suns still rule. It's the only region in Sunless Skies where a sun who is still kind of loyal to the cause of the judgments, a sun who hasn't died or become a revolutionary, resides and is at the kind of height of its powers. So this is our chance to show a whole bunch of kind of quite abstract and extreme Fallen London lore that we've only able to give glimpses of before, and that's been and will continue to be a huge challenge.
I'm sure nobody warned me that Mr. Penny
Mr. Penny's, yeah,
was going in, and then I logged onto Tumblr one day to check all of our messages. So I can only imagine as we discover more and more bits and pieces that, deeper, darker bits that people have been waiting for, how insane it will be for our fans who've been with us for a very long time.
Yes, I hope so. Yeah. I don't know. I don't want to say too much. I don't want to spoil too much about the Blue Kingdom, but it's going to be difficult.
No, that's fine. Just be very mysterious.
The thing we have to balance is this is very previously when we've explored the domain of the judgments, it's been kind of quite abstract theoretical lore, and this time you're going to be there in it, in a train, looking at it, talking to it, poking at it, possibly shooting it, and questionably some people trying to kiss it, but. And we have to be able to convey it in a way that makes sense, that supports all that player activity and behaviour. So it's inevitably kind of not going to be what people might expect from how we've talked about it before. And I think how we talk about this in Fallen London has to be different from how we talk about it in Skies, because the sort of stuff you're doing in Fallen London is so removed from it and so different from the sort of stuff you're doing in Skies. And I really like that in Fallen London we can write content that shows it from one perspective, and it feels very different from how it'll look in Sunless Skies. The trick is going to be making them not absolutely contradictory, making them feel like they're different perspectives on the same thing, rather than two completely different interpretations of it. Two separate realizations of it, rather than we've got two ideas and we've done both of them and they don't fit together and we don't care. That's not the case, but we want it so it's like looking through two different windows on the same scene.
I'd imagine that's one of the things that might be. I wonder. So we, have a whole team of writers, and we've talked in the past about how they work together to create these amazing stories. But all that lore and trying to show those different perspectives, is that difficult to do with many writers? Is there a solution we found that might be worth sharing, or?
It is difficult. It's very difficult. I think it's especially difficult when you're dealing with very high weirdness stuff, because it's because what's appealing about it is you only see glimpses of it, and it's numinous and unpredictable. And when you're reading about something that's numinous and unpredictable and you're only seeing glimpses of it, that's cool and it's enticing and you want to know more about it, and each little nugget is kind of satisfying and everything. But when you're writing about it, if you don't have solid ground under your feet, it's impossible, and it's very hard when there are multiple people writing about it. You can just end up writing completely different things, and stuff that doesn't fit together and doesn't feel like it's part of the whole. And the only solution we've found to that is talking a lot, trying it and then changing it. So saying to people, just go ahead, write it, and then when we review it and we do QA on it and we edit it, we'll talk about the tone then, and we'll see how close it is, and we can steer there. And by establishing kind of touchstones and rules that we can assume and work from. And sometimes those are thematic, although if they're thematic, they have to be really clear. And sometimes, these tend to be the very useful ones, they are specific visual details or specific events or specific characters. And if you can describe a character that fits in a certain context, you know that you can write other characters like that, that are not a stone's throw away from where that character is. So that tends to be quite useful. They work as they tend to be. If we create a bunch of those, and they form a sort of boundary markers to tell us this is the space we've got to work in.
I'm sure many people wonder how we create entire worlds, so that hopefully that's very interesting to a few people. Yeah,
and what we don't do is write a big book which has all the world's information in it at the start, because then we would never actually write the games. But we do establish these are the rules of the world. This is the core of it. These are some of the key characters, and then we build out from there. So we create a strong kind of seed that we can nurture and grow until it flourishes.
Excellent. On a totally different topic, somebody has asked if there would be something similar to Dark Drop coffee in Sunless Skies. Presumably, time is an issue, but not necessarily in the same way that it is in Fallen London.
I mean, there will be coffee. There will probably be some coffee. But there's a lot of coffee in Sunless Sea. And when we came to make Skies, we realised, where's all the bloody tea gone? And
you tell me first.
Well, this is a crime that we have rectified, Hayley. One of the things about Dark Drop coffee in Sunless Sea was that it was a trade good. So you saw it a lot, and you ferried it about all over the place, and that was good. But it felt to us, you see, this is where you ask us, someone asks, is there going to be coffee, and it triggers a massive rant about game design. But when we were writing the economy qualities the trade goods that were going to appear in Sunless Skies. We did that very early because that was one of these nice touchstones that says these are the sort of things people deal in Sunless Skies. And I think we originally suggested coffee. And then we thought that if you've abandoned London and you've abandoned Britain and you're British, and now you're out in the skies and everything's weird and there's scornflukes eating colonies and mad stars doing stuff, and nothing makes sense anymore, you're going to want things that remind you of home. And what reminds you more of home than a nice cup of tea? And so we swapped out Dark Drop coffee as a trade good for a caddy of dried tea. Because, it sold that story about Englishmen abroad very clearly. And there's quite a lot of story beats you can get into that name. So a caddy is a nice kind of little flavorful image. It gives it a nice little, it gives you a nice visual image of what it is, and it suggests that it's not a crate, it's a caddy, it's something smaller. This is a bit more kind of rare and precious, and it's dried because you can't grow this stuff everywhere. They've had to they've found somewhere where they can grow it, and then they're having to ship it about the place. I've just realized we haven't decided where they grow it. That's something we can maybe explore. Changing it from coffee to tea let us tell a whole lot of story that we wouldn't have been able to do if we kept it as coffee.
Definitely. I'm glad, because I think a lot of people now will be happy that they can have the tea. Mind you, a lot of our fans are American, so they'll probably ask for coffee too, but you can't please everybody. Somebody has also asked about prospects and bargains. I'm not necessarily sure, Chris, if you're the person to talk about that.
I think I probably am. I've just been writing about them today, and I've been testing
then perfect.
our initial implementation of them today as well. If there's anything specific you want to know about prospects and bargains, ask it in the chat, and I'll talk about them more generally for a moment while that's going on. So the idea with prospects and bargains is how we want to represent trade in the game. So in Sunless Sea, we represented trade by having each port had its own market that sold stuff and sell stuff, bought stuff and sold stuff. And you could buy stuff in one port and find a port that wanted it and then sell it there and make a small profit. However, there were some problems with that, which were there were some positives too. The positive is that it's very familiar to how trading tends to work in a lot of games that look a bit like this. It's how trading works in Elite, which was one of our original touchstones. And I think Sid Meier's Pirates and various other things. So people can see it and they recognize it and they know basically how it worked. But there were a bunch of problems as well. Because this isn't a trading game, we wanted to be playing the story. We wanted people to be playing stories. We couldn't make the trading too rewarding, or there's no reason to play the stories. You just ferry about carrying stuff, and that's not where the game's really great. Trading is a nice seasoning on the whole kind of texture of the gameplay, but it's not the core of the gameplay. So that meant we couldn't make it too profitable, and I think people generally found it quite stingy, although we found some ways to address that in Submariner with the help of Keelan, who designed some very nice trade routes that were extra profitable, and also it wasn't a great fit for the UI. It was very hard to remember where sold what and where bought what. We had like 20 or so trade goods and 30, 40 ports, and that's a lot to try and remember. And yes, sometimes ports would sell one thing but not buy it, and buy other things but not sell them. So it was a huge amount for players to remember. So we knew we wanted to try something different with trade in Skies, and this is a kind of recurring flaw of mine. But my approach to when I don't know how to solve something is I try to add story to it. What we thought was, what you like about trade is that feel when you found a good bargain and you're able to exploit it, or you see an opportunity and you know how to exploit that opportunity and you do so. It's not that there is this static set of economic possibilities, and you're kind of locating which is the best A, B, C, D path to go around to maximize it. It's about there's all this stuff going on. Can you work out a way to make a profit from it? So our attempts to tackle this are bargains and prospects. And at certain ports, there will be a chance that you can find bargains. And bargains are simply an opportunity to buy a particular trade good at a significantly reduced price, but there's only a finite amount of it. And they only last for a certain amount of time. So if you dock at a port and you see a bargain that looks interesting, it might not be there the next time you dock. And prospects are kind of the opposite. Prospects are news of a place that wants a particular trade good and is prepared to pay a very, very, very good price for it, but they don't give you the trade good. So the way you exploit bargains is by being able to jump on them when they appear, and by knowing where to take the goods to sell them. And the way you exploit prospects is by jumping on them when they appear and knowing where to get the thing they want. And if you want to be a really good trader and rake in the cash, the kind of gold that you're aiming for is when you can find a bargain that fulfills a prospect. And prospects also will. The idea is that they will only be there for a certain amount of time and then they'll disappear. I should qualify that all this is stuff that we are testing out. All this is subject to change over early access. This is kind of weird and different, and we don't know how it's going to work until we put it in front of people and see how it withstands the incandescent fires of thousands of playtesters.
And presumably it's attached to a lot of other things as well, like I'd imagine your ships hold space and
that's right, yes.
How that works.
So if you've got a ship with quite small hold space and you see a really good thing available as a bargain, but you only got like 3 spaces in your hold, that's all you can carry. But maybe you want to get rid of some of your fuel. If you know somewhere you can get back with that bargain and get a good price for it, that might be worth sacrificing some of your fuel or supplies so you can cram some extra stuff in. And we could... potentially we will need to experiment to see how far we can go with this and whether it's worth it. We can add little wrinkles to these as well, like this prospect, there's someone is holding a London family in Port Prosper wants to hold a wedding and they need a whole lot of crockery for it, so they'll pay really high, they will pay top whack for some decent crockery if you can get it there before a certain date. And if you can get it there before that certain date, you'll get a very good price. And if you get it there after that date, you'll get a less good price. And we can potentially we can put little kind of consequences that will complicate prospects and as well. I don't want to talk too much about that, because this is a sort of thing that would be very easy to make lots of promises on that then turn out to be impractical when we actually try to implement them. So I think we'll be quite cautious on how we implement the wrinkles. There's already a lot going on in the game. As Sunless Sea, it's a big, complicated game with lots of content and lots of different stuff going on at different ports. But we want prospects and bargains to be this thing that's sprinkled over the whole game, and they're things you do while you're going about solving stories and pursuing your goals. You'll see a particular opportunity. It'll say, oh, that's where I'm going. I can make use of that. Let's jump on that one. And then if you're at a loose end at the moment, you can go and pick up some prospects or go bargain hunting and see what you can do to occupy your time.
Excellent. So I think Adric, the person who had asked a bit more specific questions for prospects and bargains, we kind of answered all three. I think
so, yeah. Are they like mini quests? So a little bit, but very, very mini. Very mini indeed. Are prices for trade goods dynamic? Almost certainly no. We're not trying to create a realistic economic model of this completely bizarre society that is out there in the high wilderness. I don't even know what that would look like, but that's not something that we're trying to model. I think what we're good at is story and making kind of little nuggets of gameplay and putting some nice flavor and interesting tidbits and lore on them. And this is bargains and prospects represent a way to deliver that with trade, because you'll get a little bit of pros attached to each bargain and each prospect as you're doing them.
Great. And the next one looks like a very lore-heavy question, so I'm not sure how you feel about answering
Let's have a look. Is the King Eater of King Eater's Castle a celestial thing that we'll learn more of in Sunless Skies, or is that part of lore more for the Fallen London game itself? I think there are no current plans to address that in Skies. I don't think it would be a great fit for Skies. The thing that it is, the nature of the thing that it is, we do know the nature of the thing that it is kind of more particular to the Neath. So yeah, I would be surprised if we saw it in Skies. Yeah.
And I'm prepared to use the above line, buy low, sell high, die to space monsters as our tagline.
Yeah, that would be good. Let's do that.
A nice friend. Thank you for the suggestion. As there, we've talked a bit about certain regions and now about trading. Are there any other content-y bits that aren't necessarily in-game yet that you think players will be really excited about?
James has been working on some very interesting stuff this week. I've been giving James all the hard jobs.
Oh, lucky James.
So we'll have discoveries in the game, which are little things you can encounter when you're flying around through the high wilderness. And some discoveries will just be discoveries of things that we had in Submariner, and sometimes there were very simple things like as you're chugging around the Z-bed, you might find a crate of supplies, and you can chug over it and pick it up and gain supplies. So some of them are like that. They're just nice, simple little things you can pick up that have an effect on you. And some of them have content attached to them and little stories in there, like the wrecks in Submariner did, where you could dock at a wreck and then see what you found on it. And one of the discoveries that we're looking at for Albion are wefts of unraveling time, because Albion has been dabbling with time manipulation a lot. And
right.
That sort of thing has consequences. And so as you're zooming about Albion, you can sometimes find these wefts of unraveling time. And I am thrilled to see how art draw that. Because
it's a good thing Paul's on holiday.
Yes. Yeah. I waited until Paul was on holiday before I submitted the art brief, which was, I don't know, do something cool. And they... but there are things that you can fly up to and interact with, and they will have little kind of content nuggets attached to them. And there's various things that can happen in them, but I wouldn't be surprised if you kind of flew into a weft and then when you came out the other side, it was yesterday or tomorrow. That's quite a likely.
That would be amazing.
I think. And there's also, we have in Albion, we have a body called the Horological Office, which is the body who's responsible for making sure it's the same time all across the Empire. And it's possible that they will have quests where they ask the player to go and repair wefts of unraveling time, because it only makes things difficult for them. So yeah, that might be the sort of quest that the players can get involved in.
Excellent. Somebody had repeated a question about White's famous palace of poison and crystal, and where is it located? I don't know whether or not you can answer that.
We are not planning to do the White in any of the current regions.
Cool.
I would be very surprised if we didn't have stories that addressed the White's agents or influence. It's a very active... So the White is a particular sun that's very involved in spies and espionage and playing some grand cosmic game. So I'd be very surprised if we didn't have it represented in some way.
Excellent. And are homesteads part of the discoveries? Because we
Yes,
did mention
they
that in
are.
our latest...
Yeah, they're discoveries that you find in the Reach. Olivia's written the content for those, and they are... they're one way we wanted to address when we were creating the Reach. We ended up with lots of ports, but it didn't feel... how can I put this? It didn't... all kind of settlement was located in the ports. it didn't feel like there'd been much of a diaspora, and it felt like naturally there would be small homesteads and little settlements and stuff scattered about. So this is one way that we can tell that aspect of the story. And yes, there's a variety of homesteads you can visit, and they'll work a bit like Rex in Submariner, where you see one, you can dock at it, and then each one has there's a random chances of different stuff happening. Some will be friendly, some will be hostile, some will be destroyed, some will be sad, some might have little trade opportunities, that kind of stuff.
Cool. And there was talk about different ports having better or worse supplies, so how will that
we will see. Yeah, we talked about that.
TBA.
We've dabbled with it. We will see. It's already a very complicated game, and sometimes you have great ideas which you could do cool stuff with and are genuinely great ideas, but when they're next to 8 million other great ideas, they don't work and they become unwieldy. So yeah, we'll see. We've got our eyes on them. They are tricky to implement and track. So I don't think they're in active development at the moment, but we're in early access. We're still polishing. We'll see where it ends up. I don't want to promise anything one way or the other.
It's always amazing to see how different players interact with things as well, because obviously there's a lot of different types of people that play our games. There's, the RPG people, the people that are more into like the nitty-gritty mechanics, the fiction people, and new fans and, veteran fans. So as soon as we get people in the game, people will be doing all sorts of things we never expected.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And there's other ways we can go about tackling that supplies issue as well, that might not be you buy different sorts of supplies as a resource. There are other ways we have in the game that if we thought that was something that was important, we've got of tackling it. So yeah, we'll I think just keep an eye on early access for that stuff.
Sweet. Somebody has asked about ambitions, but particularly, would there be an ambition to attempt becoming a judgment?
Becoming a judgment.
Dun, dun, dun.
I don't know how much I want to say on this. I think, but I will say that one of the plan is to have one of the ambitions be called a throne of your own.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That's how I would like to play this.
Someone asks, overall, will there be more fluke or less fluke than Sunless Sea? I think there will probably be slightly less fluke. There seemed to be quite a lot of fluke in Sunless Sea. And then in the Mariner we went down and there was a whole port made out of fluke. So that's a lot of fluke. I think probably less fluke. Yeah.
Are there any other like similar sort of beings that people may find, like different ones but for skies?
One of our monster ideas is the Scorn Fluke, which are like lawn flukes, only really grumpy. But I can't remember what we've put. I think we've called them. We've got a slightly stream of consciousness description of them, which is like pariah prophets or something of the pariah prophets of the rubbery species. So yeah. We want to do them because we want some rubbery representation. There's a phrase.
There will be posters now.
Yeah. And it would be weird. I think it would be weird if they weren't in it. So yeah, we'll see. But I don't know how massive a part of the game they'll end up being. Someone asked, is Axial in the game? That Axial is also not in any of our regions that we're currently working on. Axial feels like a really big deal to me, and it's something that I would want us to, if we were going to do it and to go there, I want it to be a really big deal, and we spent a lot of time and effort on it because people's expectations are very, very high. Yeah, so we'll see. I think there will probably be... Axial does have a story presence to play in the setting, so I need to get better at doing this up front. Axial is the home world of the rubbery men and the flukes that appear in Fallen London. And we wanted to have a story presence. It is lost Axial. So it's lost, but obviously there are plenty of rubbery individuals who would like to find it. So I'm sure there will be a story presence for it.
And now we're receiving all sorts of questions about officers. We've got one about judgment, one about Fluke?
Judgment as an officer? No, absolutely not. Are you insane? No.
I think the answer is yes, they are insane.
Yes, that's the Fluke officer concerned? No, I think a rubbery officer is more, or a rubbery connected officer is more likely than not. We haven't got far in officers yet, simply because officer quests involve going all over the place, and they're quite hard to write when you've only got one region in the game. So we'll start introducing them fairly soonish, I think. Possibly when Albion's in, I think that would probably be a good time to start introducing them.
Cool. Somebody up above, before we lose it to the page, has asked about like the Earth and Sun not being any of the 4 regions. I think that's correct.
That is also correct, because that makes my brain break. If we put that in the game, and then you can place on the skies and go and see our sun and see Earth, in which there is the Nice. I don't know how we handle that at all. But there is also good reasons for, kind of good law reasons for our sun and solar system and Earth and the Nice to be somewhat separate and different from other judgments. So I think it makes sense that it's not in the game. But yeah, basically, I just don't know how we'd do that. It's like having a Russian doll where all the dolls are inside all the other dolls. And if you go there, you go down to the smallest one, you open the smallest one, and the biggest one's in there again. I don't even know how we do that.
Yeah, we'd like to save your brain to use for all the writing stuff, so don't think about that too much. I feel like there's been some changes along the way of officer titles. So have the titles been decided on?
I don't think so. We came up with a sort of 3 or 4 officers for the Kickstarter, and I would like to do all those ones. Certainly, I don't think we'd necessarily change those. If we made changes to the titles, they'd be quite minor ones, I think. But I certainly hope we'll be doing the Clay Conductor, the Incautious Driver, and I can't remember who the other one is.
I'm sure one of them will remind us.
Yeah. Yeah.
Very cool. I didn't realize that we were already like 48 minutes in, and I'm sure that you have other writing to do. So I'm going to keep asking questions, friends, if you have any more for Chris. But I'm going to not so subtly say, Kira, we're winding down, because I'm by myself with a computer, and I cannot be here and in front of the computer at the same time. So yeah, let's just get a few more questions, and then we'll log off so Chris can go write amazing things.
Fatalistic Signaler. Yes, that was the other one. Yes, no, I definitely want to do the Fatalistic Signaler. Yeah, no, he sounds he's going to be the most fun to write, I think. This is a kind of general question. You mentioned not wanting skies to be nothing but references to Fallen London and Sea. I'm curious, what are the parts of the game where you feel least beholden to the previous games? Where you feel you have the most room to strike out on your own and make this its own thing? That is a really interesting question. Where are we least beholden? I guess the obvious answer is in the geography. That we aren't bound by all the stuff we'd established about the Untersee and the nations that surround it. We can invent whole new places now. Something that's proved very fertile, and I didn't expect it to be, was how to put this, the politics of the judgments and how humans exist in the high wilderness. Because if you just play Fallen London, it presents a very specific view of the high wilderness as completely under the rulership of the judgments. And we've been seeding stuff that suggests that is not universally the case in the games for quite a long time now, for years now, really. But actually getting out there and exploring it and finding ways to how can humans find a space, what sort of land can they live on, what sort of communities will they build, that is a huge open space that has been really satisfying to explore. And then overlaying onto that the different states that the judgments can be in, that obviously in the Reach, the judgment is dead, so there is no one in power there, and it's a bit of a free-for-all. In Albion, the judgment has been killed and replaced, so there's basically a usurper ruling it. In Eleutheria, the judgment has turned against its comrades and doesn't support their order. And in the Blue Kingdom, we've got a loyalist judgment at the height of its power. And each of those casts a very different light on the because they're sons, do you see, on the sort of communities and stories we can tell in those places, and that's been really satisfying to work with.
Somebody's asked, was your aunt mentioned?
Yes.
And about the courier race and
yes. Yes, they will. So the courier race. I presume that you mean the messengers there, like the bazaar itself, the creatures that carry messengers between the judgments. They will be represented. Yes, we were talking about one on Wednesday, although that one was dead. But yes.
As is typical with a lot of our
dead ones are definitely represented. I'm not sure about live ones at the moment.
We'll get back to you on a later day. Cool. So I think we will wrap up now. So thanks everybody for joining us today, and thank you, Chris, for putting up with all the testing that we did to try to get you on, and for being on Skype for like an hour.
Kilogram to you and Mac for the colossal technical efforts to get this working. Really appreciate it.
Excellent. And now we can have you back on because we know how to do it.
Yes, it works. It's fine. Everything's fine.
Yay. Cool. So goodbye, everybody. Thank you for asking Chris many questions, and I'm sure he will join us again sometime soon.
That'll be lovely.
Cool. And Kira, please feel free to take us away.